last week I put it to everybody out there on social media what the topic of this video should be, and the vote came back. 75% of people wanted to hear about what it's actually like to be in a mental hospital, so let's have a chat about that. What's up guys, I'm the Viking. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hello, how's it going? This time last year I was getting to the point where I was leaving after my stay in a mental hospital. For a lot of people, the idea of a mental institution is still the very old Victorian era padded cells and straitjackets, and my personal experience of it is nothing like that. Obviously I can't talk for everybody. Everybody has different experiences when they're in hospital, and people's interpretations of the same events can be different. So I'm just talking about me. If you've ever been in a mental hospital and your experience of it differs to mine, feel free to put your experiences down in the comments below. But let's get started with my feelings on it. I was in the hospital voluntarily. There are, broadly speaking, two main ways that you are going to end up in a mental hospital. You either are there voluntarily, so either you or someone close to you has seen that your mental health is declining and it's at a point where it needs intervention, and you voluntarily go and be checked and the doctors agree with you and you end up on a ward, or you are sectioned. And what sectioning is essentially you have been picked up by the authorities, be that paramedics, police, social workers, and they have deemed you a risk to either yourself or the public, or both. So if you're sectioned, you will be held there under the Mental Health Act. So life on a mental ward it's different. It's both very regimented and very relaxed at the same time, on my personal experience of it. Now, I've actually been in two mental health wards. I was in the Ablett unit at Glenclwyd Hospital, but I don't really remember that. But then I was transferred, apparently at my request, I don't remember doing it, to the mental ward at Wrexham. I don't remember requesting the transfer because I don't remember much from the first month or so I was in the hospitals. But Wrexham is a much more modern facility. So essentially how it works is you are put in a room, that is your bedroom, and you've got basic amenities in there. You've got, you know, a bed, a chair and a desk, and that's pretty much it. Now all the bedrooms have got locks on them, partly to keep you safe and partly to keep everybody else safe if you go off on one. So there is a little bit of privacy there. But that is one of the big things that you sort of don't have when you're in a mental ward. You don't have privacy. You are checked in on very regularly. If your mental health is quite bad like mine was, you start off being checked every 15 minutes, or to a point where you may even have somebody who's watching you 24/7. You are on constant watch. Once you've finished and you're on the way to being better, you're still checked in on every hour or so, just to make sure you've not done anything to yourself or anybody else. Yeah, it's not the most private of places. It has to be that way, obviously. You know, you're not there as a summer camp, you're not there as a hotel, it's a hospital unit and you are under hospital guidelines and you're there to get better, and that means that doctors and nurses have got to check in on you. Well, there is quite a relaxed feel to modern units. There's still quite a bit of structure, so your day is pretty much pre-planned for you. You don't get much of a say in what you do. So you get up, you have breakfast, there's usually set times for breakfast and morning meds. When I was first in, I was so shut down that they used to bring the meds to me. Once I started getting a little bit better, I went to them for the meds in the morning. Then there's usually a morning activity, be that a group activity or an individual activity that you can participate in if you're feeling well enough to do so. Then lunch, and if you have meds that need to be taken around midday, you will get your meds at the same time as you're having your meal. Then there's an afternoon activity usually. Then it's time for dinner, and then You know, if people need meds then they get meds then as well. And then in the evening, sometimes there's an activity, sometimes it's just sort of winding down before everybody sort of starts going to bed around 10 p.m.-ish. There is sort of a round of meds then as well. A lot of the time I spent in my room writing. I wrote a lot while I was in hospital. Later on, I started playing guitar. My parents brought a guitar in for me, and that helped me a lot actually. That really brought me out of my shell, being able to play that. So on the ward that I was on, it was a mixed ward, and there was a whole host of mental illnesses represented there. There were people like me with anxiety and depression, there were schizophrenics, we had a couple of people with dementia along with other things. It was quite a broad spectrum of mental illnesses. There's kind of an unwritten rule where you don't talk about it all that often unless you want to. So officially speaking, none of us knew what any of us were in for, but sometimes you got more comfortable with people and you started chatting about why you were in the hospital. I'd been into mental health units as a visitor, but never as a patient, and it is a very, very different experience being a patient to being a visitor, because when you visit people in a mental health facility, there is this sort of very brief snapshot of time, and it's usually quite quiet because visiting times are, and you know, everything's kind of calm and serene, and a lot of the time that is not the case. You'd quite often get the alarms going when something was kicking off, either in the ward that I was on or one of the other wards in the facility. It was kind of intimidating at first, but after a couple of days you get used to it, as weird as that sounds. You also get this sort of uneasy feeling around the end of the month towards when it's going to be a full moon, and as stupid as that sounds, it is actually a real thing. You know, I was in mental hospital for 3 to 4 months, and I definitely noticed when it was the full moon, because I started getting short-tempered and everybody started to act a bit weird. So the full moon had finished, everything sort of settled back down again for the next few weeks. It's kind of an odd phenomenon, really, but it's something that I really definitely noticed, and something that was commented on by friends and family as well. But you're not just there to sit around and, you know, have meals 3 times a day. You're there to get better. So quite often when you're in a mental health situation, you have to experiment a bit with the different meds and what's going to work. So a lot of what you did when you were there was doctors prescribing new meds and checking in on you and making sure that you know, weren't having too many bad side effects from those. It's mainly a case of focusing and healing. So there's loads of different doctors that turn up. You've got your, you know, psychologists, you've got your medical doctors, you've got, quite often you get students and trainee nurses and medical students who are doing rotations on mental health, and they'll come in and they'll ask questions and they'll, you know, psychoanalyze you, and they'll ask you how you're getting on with the meds and what side effects you're having, and oh, that's a bit weird, maybe we should try you on this. And it's not that it gets old, it's just after the 30th time of telling people your personal story, you kind of get sick of it after a while. So they'll try you on all sorts of different meds, they'll try you on all sorts of different therapies. I had occupational therapy, that did the most good for me. Did a lot of mindfulness training and a lot of meditation techniques and relaxation techniques, which definitely helped my anxiety. And then eventually you will get better enough to where you can spend a bit of time off the wards. So for me, it started slowly. It started with, you know, my parents taking me out for a day out in the countryside, short walks around town, and then it built up and built up and built up until I was ready to come home. But the weird thing is, for the first few months after you come home, you don't really leave the ward. You become institutionalised to the way the ward works very quickly. All of a sudden you've gone from this very controlled, very secure, very safe area back into the world and back into the situation that you were in before you went into the hospital and the time that made you as ill as you were. And it's intimidating and it's scary to come back. One of the strangest feelings that I've personally got is that I quite often miss being on a mental ward. I miss the safety, I miss not having to think for myself so much. I miss having that security and that knowledge that if things do go wrong, I'm in the right place and I'm not a risk to myself or other people. I don't want to go back. I don't want to be in a position where I need to go back again. But at the same time, there are days where I'm just like, I really wish I was back there and that I didn't have to deal with all this sort of stuff. Mental wards are, in my experience, a very polarising place. They are both incredibly welcoming and incredibly safe feeling and comforting, but at the same time they are really scary because you can see just how bad mental health can get when you're on these wards. So in summation, would I recommend going to a mental hospital? Not if you don't need to. I will admit I do miss it. I do miss the structure. I do miss the freedom in not having to worry about anything other than getting better, but at the same time it's not a place you want to spend your whole life in. It serves a very specific purpose, and the doctors and nurses and medical professionals who are involved in mental health care do not get the praise that they deserve. They work unbelievably hard for very little money. They work for very long hours and they work under some of the most challenging conditions I think it's possible to work in. And with that, folks, we come to the end of Mental Health Awareness Month. I hope you've enjoyed, or at least learnt a little bit from this week. I've quite enjoyed making these videos. It's been kind of freeing to talk openly about mental health issues again. I've not done it in a while, so that's kind of nice. As always, guys, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps me out here on the channel, lets me know I'm on the right path. And if you've got an experience you want to share from your time in a mental health institute, or even with just general things about your mental health, then feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm also going to put some links in the description for some mental health charities here in the UK that I particularly like. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with any of them. They've just got some really good, solid advice on their websites that can possibly help you. But for now, I've been the Biking Viking. As always, you've been awesome. And I will see you next week when we get back to working on the bike and going places potentially and talking about things that aren't to do with mental health. I'll see you next time.